The wind howled across the dusty Nevada range, kicking up sand that stung her face like 1,000 tiny needles. Private First Class Emily Kane stood rigid, her M24 sniper rifle cradled in her arms, her eyes fixed on the distant target. The other recruits, all men, snickered behind her, their whispers sharp as the desert air. "She's gonna choke," one muttered, loud enough for her to hear. "No way a girl like her hits that mark." Emily's jaw tightened, but she didn't flinch. This was her moment, her shot to prove them wrong. Little did they know, the range was about to become something none of them expected, a battlefield where her skill would be the difference between life and death. Hey, if you're as gripped by this story as I am telling it, hit that subscribe button to join us for more epic tales like this one. Emily's story was just beginning, and what happened next would silence every doubter in the most unimaginable way. Emily Kane wasn't supposed to be here. Growing up in a small Ohio town, she'd been the quiet kid, the one who spent hours in the woods with her dad's old hunting rifle, teaching herself to shoot with a precision that startled even the local hunters. She wasn't tall or imposing, a barely 5'4", with a slight frame that made her look younger than her 22 years. But her eyes, sharp and unyielding, told a different story. They were the eyes of someone who'd faced rejection before and come out stronger. Joining the army had been her way of proving she could be more than what her small town expected. Yet here, at the elite sniper qualification course at Fort Irwin, she was an outsider again. The other recruits, hardened soldiers with egos as big as their biceps, saw her as a liability. "Stick to the kitchen, Kane," one had sneered during morning drills. The instructors, grizzled veterans, didn't mock her outright, but their skeptical glances said enough. They didn't think she'd last a week. The qualification course was brutally grueling days of marksmanship drills, physical endurance tests, and mental warfare designed to break even the toughest soldiers. Emily thrived in the silence of the range, where it was just her, the rifle, and the target. She aced the written exams, memorized wind dodge charts, and calculated bullet drop with a speed that left some of the men scrambling. But today, on the live-fire range, with the 1,000-yard shot looming, the pressure was suffocating. The target was a steel plate, barely visible through the heat haze, swaying in the wind. The recruits stood in a loose semicircle, watching her every move. "Bet she misses by a mile," a recruit named Carter whispered, his smirk audible. Emily adjusted her scope, her fingers steady despite the knot in her stomach. She could feel the rise boring into her, waiting for failure. She exhaled slowly, her breath sinking with the rhythm of her heartbeat. She pulled the trigger. The crack of the shot echoed across the range. For a moment, time froze. Then the spotter's voice rang out through the radio. "Hit dead center." A murmur rippled through the group, not of admiration, but disbelief. Carter snorted. "Beginner's luck." The instructor, Sergeant Hollis, a man with a face like weathered leather, raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Emily reset her position, her face unreadable. She didn't need their approval, and not yet. She knew the real test was coming, and it wasn't the kind you passed with a single shot. The day wore on, shot after shot, and Emily hit every target with unnerving precision. The snickers faded, replaced by grudging silence, but the tension only grew. They weren't rooting for her, they were waiting for her to crack. As dusk painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, the final test of the day loomed, a high-stress simulation. The recruits would face moving targets under time pressure, mimicking real combat conditions. The instructors cranked up the intensity, barking orders and blasting air horns to simulate battlefield chaos. Emily's heart pounded as she took her position in the prone, her rifle steady despite the noise. The targets popped up at random, 500 yards, 700 yards, 900 yards each, requiring split-second calculations. She hit them all, her movements fluid, almost mechanical. The other recruits struggled, some missing entirely, others cursing under their breath. Carter, the loudest of her critics, fumbled his reload, his shots going wide. Emily didn't glance his way, but she felt a spark of satisfaction. She was proving them wrong, one bullet at a time. But the real turning point came just as the sun dipped below the horizon. The range was supposed to shut down for the night, the recruits sent back to their barracks to lick their wounds or gloat over their scores. That's when the radio crackled with a voice none of them recognized. It was low, urgent, and laced with static. All personnel, this is not a drill. Hostile forces detected 3 miles east of the range. Armed insurgents, heavily equipped, moving fast. Prepare to engage. The words hit like a shockwave. The instructors froze, their faces paling. The recruits exchanged glances, some confused, others disbelieving. Was this part of the simulation? Sergeant Hollis grabbed the radio, his voice sharp. Confirm. Command. Insurgents here. The response was immediate. Confirmed. ETA 10 minutes. Arm up. Now. Panic rippled through the group. This wasn't supposed to happen. Fort Irwin was a training ground, not a war zone. But the urgency in the voice on the radio was unmistakable. Emily's pulse raced, but her mind snapped into focus. She'd trained for these, not just the range, but the chaos of combat. The instructors scrambled to distribute live ammunition, their usual calm replaced by frenetic energy. Kane, Hollis barked, "You're on overwatch. Get to the ridge. Now." Emily didn't hesitate. She grabbed her rifle and sprinted toward the elevated position overlooking the range, her boots pounding the rocky terrain. The other recruits were slower, some fumbling with their gear, others still processing the reality of what was happening. Carter, for all his bravado, looked pale, his hands shaking as he loaded his weapon. From the ridge, Emily had a clear view of the desert stretching eastward. The night was coming fast, the horizon swallowed by shadows. She set up her rifle, her scope scanning the darkness. Her training kicked in. Control your breathing, read the wind, trust your instincts. She could hear the recruits below, their voices a mix of fear and bravado. Carter was shouting something about taking them out, but his voice cracked. Emily ignored it. She was in her element now, the world narrowing to the crosshairs of her scope. Minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last. Then she saw flickers of movement in the distance, shapes emerging from the darkness. Armed figures, moving tactically, their silhouettes unmistakable against the faint glow of the horizon. Insurgents, real ones. The radio crackled again. "Engage only on my order," Hollis commanded. Emily's finger hovered near the trigger, her heart steady despite the adrenaline flooding her veins. The insurgents were closing in, their numbers growing clearer, maybe a dozen, armed with rifles and what looked like RPGs. They weren't amateurs, they moved with purpose, fanning out to flank the range. Emily's mind raced. The range was wide open, the recruits exposed. If the insurgents got within 500 yards, it would be a slaughter. She adjusted her scope, calculating wind speed and distance. The lead insurgent was 800 yards out, crouching behind a boulder. She could take him, but Hollis hadn't given the order. She glanced down at the recruits. Some were in position, but others were disorganized, their training crumbling under the weight of real danger. Then it happened. A flash of light from the insurgent linear, an RPG streaking toward the range. It hit a supply grate, exploding in a fireball that lit up the night. Screams erupted below. "Open fire!" Hollis roared. The recruits unleashed a chaotic barrage, bullets spraying wildly. Most missed their marks, the insurgents too far and too well covered. Emily didn't fire. She waited, her scope locked on the lead insurgent. He was directing the others, pointing toward the range's weak flank. If he went down, the coordination might falter. Her finger tightened on the trigger. The shot was clean, precise. The insurgent dropped, his body crumpling behind the boulder. The others hesitated, their movements faltering. Emily didn't pause. She shifted her aim, picking off another insurgent at 700 yards, then another at 900. Each shot was a statement, a defiance of every doubt cast her way. Below, the recruits were struggling. Carter's rifle jammed, and he cursed, slamming it against the ground. Hollis was shouting orders, trying to rally them, but the insurgents were closing in, their fire more accurate now. Emily saw the danger before anyone else. A sniper, perched on a distant rise, his scope glinting in the moonlight. He was aiming for Hollis. Emily didn't think. She adjusted her position, her scope finding the enemy sniper's head. The shot was impossible for most to 1,200 yards, crosswind, low visibility. But Emily wasn't most. She fired. The sniper slumped, his rifle falling from his hands. Hollis turned, unaware of how close he'd come to death, and saw Emily on the ridge. For the first time, his eyes held something new, respect. The tide was turning. Emily's precision gave the recruits a chance to regroup. Hollis organized a defensive line, and the insurgents, now leaderless and disoriented, began to falter. Emily kept firing, each shot deliberate, each one saving lives. An insurgent with an RPG rose to fire. She dropped him before he could aim. Another tried to flank the range. She stopped him cold. The recruits below began to follow her lead, their fire more focused now. Carter, his bravado gone, looked up at the ridge, his face a mix of shame and awe. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. When the last insurgent fell, the desert fell silent. The only sound the crackle of the burning crate and the ragged breathing of the recruits. Hollis climbed the ridge, his face streaked with sweat and dust. He looked at Emily, still in her prone position, her rifle steady. "Kane," he said, his voice gruff but heavy with meaning, "you saved our asses out there." Emily didn't respond. She didn't need to. The range was littered with the evidence of her skill. Insurgents down, recruits alive. The other soldiers gathered below, their eyes on her now, not with mockery but with something closer to reverence. Carter approached, his head low. "I was wrong about you," he muttered, barely audible. Emily nodded, her expression unchanged. She didn't need his apology. She'd proven herself to the only person who mattered, herself. As the instructors secured their range and called for reinforcements, word of the attack spread. An investigation later revealed the insurgents were part of a rogue militia, testing the base's defenses in a brazen raid. They hadn't expected resistance, let alone a single sniper turning the tables. Emily's actions earned her a commendation, but more than that, they earned her respect. The recruits who'd mocked her now sought her advice, her quiet confidence a beacon in the chaos. She didn't gloat. She didn't need to. The range had become her proving ground, and she'd rewritten her story in bullet holes in bravery. Years later, Emily would return to that same Nevada range as an instructor, training the next generation of snipers. She'd tell them about that night, and not to boast, but to teach them what she learned. That skill isn't about size or strength, but focus, heart, and the will to keep going when everyone else doubts you. The recruits would listen, wide-eyed, as she described the moment the range turned into a battlefield, and how she turned the tide. Her story became legend, whispered among soldiers across bases, a reminder that heroes can come from the unlikeliest places. As the sun rose over the desert that morning, painting the sky in shades of gold, Emily stood alone on the ridge, her rifle at her side. She looked out at the range, now scarred by battle, and felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just Private Kane anymore. She was a soldier, a sniper, a survivor, and no one would ever mock her again. Hey, what an incredible journey, right? I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching this video from? Drop a comment and let me know which part of the country you're tuning in from.